Please, Madam Elsie, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay. Hi, everyone, and thank you for very good presentation, Uzizi and your team. Well done, guys. So, right now we have there's a drug not drug. There's a medication that's currently going on around in Nigeria that's been touted as a preventive medication and as a treatment regimen, and a lot of credible, I mean, medical professionals have been saying it's as good as, in fact, they're calling it a miracle cure. Mectizan, ivermectin. I think ivermectin is the whatever name they call it. So, and this evening alone, I've heard different opinions about the effectiveness or otherwise of the medication. And since we have you all here, I just wanted to find out, do you know anything about it? Is it something we should be looking at seriously? Because from what we've heard, it's good as prevention, it's good as a treatment regimen. And as a matter of fact, where I live, in the past 3 days, the prices of the cost of this thing has gone up maybe by about 20%, and it's beginning to go off the shelves. So there's some sort of panic buying going on. People are rushing for it and all. At the same time, about an hour or so before this meeting started, my youngest brother, who's in Johannesburg, called me to say that he tried to get this medication from a pharmacy, and he was warned never to ask for it again, that it's not fit for human consumption. And that it's actually, in South Africa, it's actually used for treating pigs and horses. So, I mean, I'm a very, very lay man when it comes to medical stuff. So you all are here, and I want to just quickly find out, do you know anything about this, whatever it is, and is it safe? Is it something we should be looking at? Because some of us are not likely to, even if we want to take the vaccine, some of us are not likely to be in a position to take it for a very long time to come. And we get exposed every single day. You know, I'm not in the medical field, no one in my home is. And so is this something we can possibly look at as an alternative to taking the vaccine immediately?
Yeah, hi, this is Keith Robinson. So, you know, obviously, everybody's looking to ensure that we keep people safe. My larger concern is that we studied ivermectin. We studied it here in the United States, and we found it ineffective. I think the recent article that's come out that many doctors are now referring to, and I think that's why in your area, physicians are stating that it will work, found that in certain populations, specialized population that they studied, it was able to decrease hospitalization in that population. And so that forced, in some settings, because so many physicians in that area where the study was performed, to reach out to, and there's a special meeting actually this past Thursday at the FDA to convene and rediscuss the data that had been collected. And what we found were that there's some plausibility, but not enough people have been treated with ivermectin to actually make it a strong statement to state that it is a treatment for prevention of and again, this is prevention of COVID-19 infection. And so the FDA changed their recommendation from a do not recommend to a we don't have a recommendation, meaning plus minus. We don't know that it does or does not help. I know that may not answer directly your question, but as a treating physician, and I think, again, the nephrologist mentioned that we want best medicine and best evidence before we make a recommendation. My concern is that if the FDA, even with the new data presented to them by the physician panel, could not state that it was a treatment in prevention of COVID, I'm less likely as a physician to recommend it to my patients. I'm less likely to suggest that it's a treatment. And again, what we know about COVID is there's a Goldilocks period. You have to give the right treatment at the right time in order to have the best, not too hot, not too cold. And ivermectin has a very narrow window where it would work. And so the idea, and I think to your loved one, your family member's concern, that was addressed, which is we can make people a heck of a lot sicker by just taking the medication ivermectin, because it's not benign on the liver and it's not benign on the kidney, than actually prevention of the COVID virus itself. And so my recommendations are to follow what the leading governments, EMA, European, and the FDA here in the United States have stated, which is there's not enough evidence to suggest that anyone take it. But again, there's not enough evidence to suggest that you shouldn't try if your local physician suggests that in the area, it would benefit. But again, understanding the data that I have been able to see in the trials that we've studied with ivermectin from this past, last year's winter, actually, we studied it, it did not work. And so I wouldn't give the recommendation, at least from a treating physician standpoint, to suggest that it would prevent you from getting sick.
Thank you, Keith. Who's our next raised hand?
Mr. Burt. Mr. Burt.
Hi, everyone. Thanks so much again for putting this together. It's very, very informative, and it's been very, very useful so far. I think mine's kind of like a rider to Elsie's question and to a lot of the things you guys have been saying. Is there a compendium anywhere or like a source where people can actually look at the best practice or the best approaches to tackling COVID, whether therapy or vaccinations for different parts of the globe? I mean, for example, most of us attending here now from Nigeria, but I live in the UK, and there's still debate. The debate is very popular, but you want to base any decisions, whether on receiving any vaccination or recommending anything to anyone elsewhere, on the best information that's available. I know that's probably a big ask, but listening to you guys, I feel, yeah, there definitely is a source of reliable information that people can refer to.
So I can tackle that very quickly. So I would refer you to the NIH treatment guidelines page, and it's publicly available information. I would also refer you to the CDC website. They have a lot of information that will help in both treatment and vaccinations. Aside that, it's very interesting that even newspaper organizations like New York Times and Washington Post have very useful information. I was shocked when I was preparing for some COVID talk with our local groups here at how much information New York Times and Washington Post had on both the treatment and vaccinations as a whole. So those are some useful sources. And I sent to Zizi a list of references with links, which maybe she can circulate. That would, if you click on the link, will take you to those websites.
I think also too, Bertram, is, because, the way drugs are made, like in the US, for example, we go through the FDA. In Europe, for example, we go through, and many of the bodies in the different countries will have what's called their own standard of care, just in case there are nuances or just even availability issues, right? Like, for example, in December, in the UK, they had an emergency use authorization for the AstraZeneca virus, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine. So every country will have it, but it's going to be driven by the regulatory agency, and is also going to be driven in part by the availability, what's available in that area. Now, I have to say, the Oxford vaccine is actually a DNA vaccine. It's not an mRNA vaccine. It's different from the other two because it has, it doesn't have, like with the Pfizer vaccine, you have to store it at like a -70. So it doesn't have those kinds of storage issues. But in terms of efficacy, I mean, the literature has shown that the mRNA vaccine is more effective. Now, if you're in the UK, for example, and that's what you have available to you, now you have to remember that there are lots of other things besides the vaccine. So I can talk about it as a scientist, but I also have to talk about it like even as a business person, because at the end of the day, that's what drives pharma, right? So a lot of countries have a nationalistic interest where they have tried to purchase for their own countries. So if, for example, I've got the UK who's funding AstraZeneca, for example, and Oxford, and they have so many million vaccines, and it's the first one out in the UK. Well, it's only 70% effective. So that means maybe 30% of the time it won't work. And then you look at the ones that we have here in the US that are 95% effective. So it's like, do we wait for these ones or do we vaccinate? It's all those kinds of things. So each agency has their own standard of care. And most physicians generally know that if I'm in this area, I can go to this agency to get what that standard of care is. So the physicians would know. The general public may not, but it will be common knowledge.
So I guess, sorry, I'm just jumping back in. So I guess that's the sort of, would you say that's the sort of thing that is really fanning the flames of controversy then, in terms of the sort of decisions government makes as to what approach it wants to take to the vaccination or the treatment, and creating a lot of controversy? I think that's what it is.
I think it's availability as well. Because like even in the US, for example, we thought that we might get about 40 million doses by March, right? So 40 million doses, you have to remember that, like with the Pfizer and the Moderna vaccines, you need at least 2 doses. You need 2 doses, 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks apart. So that's like maybe 20 million people. So right now, the reality is that we're experiencing a bit of a bottleneck, just business-wise, frankly, in terms of getting these vaccines out as quickly as possible. So that's why you see so many countries are rushing to have their own vaccine. So the US obviously wants to take care of the US, just like Canada wants to take care of their citizens first. Although I have to say they have, Pfizer's and the rest of them, these are multinational companies, so they've got vaccine allocations for different parts of the country. So that's kind of where it's at, frankly. I will say that one good thing that came out of China and of Wuhan in all of this, and I think Dr. Onime alluded to that, is that when this COVID became known, this COVID-19, one of the very good things that they did was that they put out the sequence out there. They did. And because they put out the sequence, then we were now able to, know the sequence, genetic code of it, and then create these vaccines. So anyway, Larry, I think you were trying to say something. No? Oh, I think you're on mute. Larry, you're on mute.
Sorry, I'm muting myself. I wanted to add something. You are right that there's a business aspect to information, treatments, and vaccines. And I in the YouTube video I produced on the vaccine, I made people understand that vaccines are produced by many, many other countries. And I mentioned the Chinese vaccine, which has been given to maybe close to maybe 2 million or 3 million Chinese people already. So the problem is the effectiveness. I can tell you clearly from that video, I said the 2 most effective vaccines are the Moderna as well as the Pfizer vaccine. And of course, based on studies that are published is how we know that, not based on what somebody in the government tells us. So China may not want to buy a Pfizer or a Moderna vaccine because, of course, it's going to be more expensive. They want to make a vaccine that they will be able to have some control. But effectiveness is the key. Yeah. And effectiveness is something you cannot change. Science is simple. You can show effectiveness. And not only that, we already know that some of the vaccines have been given in the United Arab Emirates, in Indonesia, it's been given in Turkey and in India. So we actually know the effectiveness because in places in which it is open for us to be able to see. And no vaccine among all the Sinovac, which is the China's vaccine, and the Sinopharm is as effective as the vaccine that we're giving right now. But every country has their, wants to be able to buy it at what they can afford. And as a side comment on ivermectin, I thought IDA was going to comment on it. We looked at those studies on ivermectin. They were very small studies. They were not really, one even came from Nigeria. There were not a lot of people. When we're talking about studies, we're talking about 40, 50,000 people. So when Dr. Robinson mentioned about they've looked at it, Yes, people want things that are cheap, that are inexpensive, like hydroxychloroquine, that will simply solve the problem. Unfortunately, there's really nothing out there. And a simple solution that is already available are vaccines. And the more people get it, the less likely people will get sick. And that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. Okay, thank you. Well, who was our third question?
We have Mr. Ken next.
Mr. Ken.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for fantastic presentations from all of you. My questions are twofold. One, the Pfizer vaccine is being given out here, and my understanding is when Pfizer did their studies, it was dose 1, dose 2 is 3 weeks later. Now the government have decided to give the dose 3 months later. Are there any things to worry about that in the UK, number one? Two, is there different vaccines out there? Can you have a mixture of vaccines or not, or is it not advised?
I can answer that question and I'll have Onime answer it, because Onime is academic. The bottom line is that if something is studied, the way it's studied is the way it should be given. Governments have different political agendas on why they want to do something. So when we say something is 97% effective, we are telling you it's because we gave you Pfizer one, and in 3 weeks' time we gave it, that's why it's 97% effective. The moment you start to do anything else different from how it was studied, initially, you are on your own. So if you are deciding to give it 3 months later, that's it. However, the principle of immunology says that the first dose is a primer dose. The second dose is what now creates the major immunity. So initially you have a primer dose, and that second dose, if you're given it 3 months later, will it be as sufficient? They want to just immunize as many people as possible, and they don't have the money. This NHS, they don't have the billions to just simply buy vaccines. So therefore, they're trying to see if they can stretch it across the world. But based on scientific data, if you don't do it the way it was studied, you won't get the same result, period.
Yeah. And, you know, before Onime comes in, I'm hoping that Keith and Linus can say something about this. And, you know, to Larry's point, that's actually dangerous to do it, because when you do a clinical trial, it's a controlled study and you're looking at different parameters. So to take a vaccine and wait 3 months later, I mean, think about the different types of people that you're going to actually be creating more problems than solutions. So that's very surprising, really, to hear that. And I'm wondering, in places where that kind of information is going on in Nahoro, if there is any pushback from like the medical community or even from Pfizer itself and saying, listen, you're not using our medication according to its specifications, therefore we cannot be liable for the kinds of results that are produced. So I'm going to just let Keith and Onime and Linus answer what they think about giving the vaccines and not following the instructions.
Well, Enaro, it's sad to hear that they are waiting out time. I guess some of the decision, like Larry elucidated, is made out of cost and political expediency. Okay, when you give the vaccine as not as specified, then unfortunately it's not going to work, because the control studies were done under these specified times, if you understand what I'm saying. Secondly, on the issue of mixing vaccine, for instance, giving Moderna and then giving Pfizer, you are advised to stick to one particular vaccine. Okay, you are advised to stick to one vaccine. On the second issue of this 3 months time, one of the problems that we may run into, unless the Biden administration sits up, is that we thought that there was so much vaccine to get the second dose immediately. Okay, so right now what we run into is that there is probably no second dose available. They are working actively to ensure that the second dose is available, but right now they are trying to get everybody to get the first dose. I'm hoping, and I know that the American Medical Association will push back fiercely on it, that people get their second dose as of when scheduled and as of when due, without having to go and mix Moderna or Pfizer. Both RNA vaccine, but they are a bit different in their constitution.
Okay. And I think, Linus, I think that's what, I'm a trained molecular biologist, so I play in the DNA space, and I get all sorts of crazy questions. And I think that's what fuels things like this, because these vaccines are already working on a genetic level. So if you go mix like the Pfizer and the AstraZeneca, well, Pfizer is mRNA. It's the mRNA, you know, translating to the protein. But AstraZeneca is actually a DNA vaccine. It goes into the nucleus. So you are opening up just all kinds of other possibilities when you're using the vaccine in the way that you don't intend. Now we have a challenge with with this coronavirus because it's highly mutagenic. You know, there are so many strains of it, and now we've got these 3 different variants. You know, it's just, I wouldn't, you know, you wouldn't recommend, you know, when you're working with a vaccine that is working at a genetic level like this, to be doing this kind of mixing. It just, I don't know, it's very uncomfortable. So anyway.
So
I get mixing is out, but the guidance in the UK and what's going on here is you get your second dose at 3 months. Okay, I know Pfizer said it's 3 weeks, but that's not happening here. So basically, the premise on which the vaccine was developed is not how it's being administered or used. So, which is it?
So let me just add to that. So we have to realize that when studies are done, they are done in very controlled settings. Understand, in the real world, you are not usually going to be able to replicate those settings. All sorts of things happen. Like they say, stuff happens. Even here in the US, we're facing that kind of problem. Yes, the recommendation is that you should stick to what guidance to what was studied. However, for practical reasons, some people may miss, even if it's not the government mandating it as it is in the UK. They may miss for whatever reason. The manufacturers have put a window there. They've put a 4 to 5 day window either way. That is known. You can, from 4 to 5 days before or 4 to 5 days after. I think I read that in one of the papers. We are facing that here because not enough vaccine is available. I suspect that the timing is going to shift a little bit. As more becomes available, we will be able to stick more to the guidelines. Just to give a solace, let's remember, this is not the first time we're dealing with vaccines. Hepatitis B vaccine, 016 is the schedule we follow. However, if you miss your dose, you just sticking from where you stopped. The same happens with whether it's the DTP or whatever, OPV or whatever vaccines, you just follow the schedule. As to mixing types, we have not studied that. There's going to be natural experiments. You probably can mix the Moderna and Pfizer because they have the same platform. They're both mRNA vaccines. The others, like the AstraZeneca, the Johnson & Johnson soon to come out, those are vector vaccines. They act differently. And you probably don't want to mix that and the mRNA vaccines. That said, whether big words, RNA, DNA, remember that when a virus infects your cells, if it's an RNA virus, the RNA in your cytoplasm gets replicated. It works just like this vaccine is working. It's just a signal. Your cells use that signal to make more virus. The DNA ones, they go to the nucleus and the DNA gets transformed to RNA. And then again, your cell follows that same code or that same signal. So the mechanisms are different. I would say that maybe I've heard talk about maybe you can mix Pfizer and Moderna, but like Larry says, you're on your own because we don't have study data to support that. As more people do that, if it is done, we will have data from the EPI folks who will look at this later.